Once upon a time, the gaming industry wasn't ruled by open-world games and battle royales stuffed with microtransactions, but by pure, mindless, absolutely brutal and bloody first-person shooters. Shooters where you didn't have to complete missions, collect useless crap, or follow some convoluted story, you just had to brutally annihilate entire hordes of enemies as violently as possible. Serious Sam, Will Rock, and many other titles bring that sweet nostalgic feeling to gamers worldwide. Today, I want to tell you about an old-school shooter that remained unmatched, so sit back and listen to the story of how Painkiller died. Welcome to Golden Joystick. If you're digging this deep dive into gaming history, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Before we dive into the game itself, let's talk about the folks who made it. Just some regular Polish dudes from a company called People Can Fly, and the studio popped up in 2002 when Adrian Chmielars, along with a couple of buddies, Andrzej Poznanski and Michael Kozieracki, decided to open up shop and make video games. Within a few months, they grew to about 20 people and started working on their first game. Didn't take them long to pick a genre, they went straight for a first-person shooter. Fun fact for you guys, People Can Fly was actually one of the first major Polish game studios to gain international recognition. Before The Witcher made Poland famous in gaming, these guys were already putting the country on the map. Poland's game dev scene was basically non-existent in the early 2000s, so what they achieved was pretty damn impressive. 2 years later, in 2004, the first Painkiller dropped and absolutely exploded onto the scene. Sure, the developers never hid the fact that they drew inspiration from absolute classics like Doom, Quake, and Serious Sam for their debut project, but like any talented crew, they took only the best parts from those games, sprinkled in their own secret sauce, and ended up creating something truly unique. Painkiller's story is dead simple. Main character Daniel Garner gets into a car crash with his wife and ends up in purgatory. Then this archangel, Samael, shows up and basically goes, "Look buddy, here's the deal. If you want to earn forgiveness for all your sins and save your wife, you gotta kill 4 of Lucifer's generals and prevent a war between heaven and hell." Obviously, Daniel doesn't really have much choice, so he sets off on his own personal crusade against legions of undead and hellish minions. And at this point, you can basically forget about the story completely. That's not what this game is about. Painkiller is all about the gameplay. Here's something interesting. The whole dead protagonist in purgatory concept was pretty fresh for 2004. Most FPS games were either military shooters or sci-fi adventures. Painkiller's gothic horror aesthetic mixed with heavy metal vibes was basically the video game equivalent of a Judas Priest album cover coming to life. And honestly, that's exactly what gaming needed at the time. So basically, the game's got 5 chapters split into 24 levels, and each one not only takes place in different locations, but the enemies are almost always unique too. So yeah, the game immediately stood out with its sheer amount of content, almost like it was making fun of the mighty Serious Sam and his endless Egyptian vacation. Here's the kicker, you could skip the entire 5th chapter if you were crazy enough to beat the game on insanity difficulty. They'd show you the finale right at the end of chapter 4. This weird decision was because that ending was actually a fake one, specially made for those who managed to beat death in the previous chapters. But the game wasn't just good because of its levels and variety of locations. What's the most important thing in a kick-ass mindless shooter? That's right, a huge arsenal of cool and unusual guns. And Painkiller absolutely nails this. How about a rifle that shoots shurikens and can also zap things with electricity, or maybe a stake gun with an underbarrel grenade launcher, a minigun with a built-in rocket launcher, or a shotgun with freezing rounds? Every single weapon in the game had an alternate fire mode that really spiced up the gameplay and made the process of destroying undead so damn addictive that you literally couldn't stop. The stake gun deserves special mention here. This thing became so iconic that it basically defined Painkiller's identity. You could pin enemies to walls with massive wooden stakes, and I'm talking about literally nailing a demon to a cathedral wall from 50 feet away. The physics engine would calculate the trajectory and force, making each kill feel brutally satisfying. No other FPS at the time had anything quite like it. But even then, People Can Fly figured the variety still wasn't enough, so they threw in tarot cards. As you played through levels, you could collect gold from little secrets, or just along the way, to buy these tarot cards. They came in 2 types, passive and active. When activated, they'd give you an increased health or boosted damage. The game had 24 of them total, so you could mix and match cards to shake up the gameplay however the hell you wanted. In the end, the Polish team created the perfect shooter. The locations were fun to explore and never got old. The weapons were loud as hell and killed beautifully, and those tarot cards added their own special spice to the mix. What really blew people's minds back then was how enemies reacted to getting hit. Their bodies could explode into bloody chunks or go flying hilariously from a point-blank shotgun blast thanks to the ragdoll physics. And yeah, you could literally pin them to walls with the stake gun. As if all that wasn't enough, the developers also added an adrenaline meter you could activate. Daniel would briefly transform into this demonic entity that could kill almost any undead bastard with a single shot. So it's absolutely no surprise that when it launched, Painkiller gained a whole army of devoted fans. Critics and regular gamers were falling over themselves to praise it, and now Painkiller sits proudly at 8.1 on Metacritic. People demanded more of this bloody feast, and of course People Can Fly couldn't refuse them that pleasure. That same year, they released an expansion called Battle Out of Hell. After killing Lucifer at the end of the main game and saving his wife, Daniel learns that the devil's right hand, Alistair, is still alive and ready to continue his master's bloody work. Obviously, our hero can't leave things as they are and sets off to finish what he started. The expansion gave us 10 brand new locations with their own set of unique enemies and 2 new guns. An SMG with an underbarrel flamethrower, and a stake gun that fires 5 projectiles at once and scatters grenades. The developer's imagination knew no bounds. Personally, I'll never forget that creepy orphanage level that spent a solid minute and a half building this thick horror movie atmosphere. Before throwing you straight into the meat grinder, that orphanage level is still considered one of the best horror levels in any action game. It was inspired by classic horror movies like The Shining and Session 9. The developers actually watched a bunch of horror films during development to nail that atmosphere. Fun fact, they recorded actual children's toys in music boxes, then distorted them to create that spine-chilling ambient sound. Creepy as hell, but genius game design. The expansion turned out to be more than successful. Players were thrilled with this tasty dessert, though they were a bit bummed that compared to the main game, there wasn't as much content. The expansion ended up scoring 7.7. After such a successful debut, People Can Fly signed a contract with THQ and went off to make another project under their wing. Meanwhile, all the rights to the Painkiller franchise stayed with the original game's publisher, Dreamcatcher Interactive. Of course, the publisher didn't want to shelve this literal gold mine and decided to trust the next Painkiller game to Mindware Studios. And here's where things get interesting. Originally, Mindware was making a fan mod for Painkiller, but after signing with Dreamcatcher, that little fan mod grew into a full standalone expansion called Painkiller Overdose, which dropped in 2007. Overdose's story picks up right after the original game's ending. After Lucifer's death, it suddenly turns out that thousands of years ago, the forces of heaven and hell worked together to imprison the most powerful half-angel, half-demon named Belial. But after the Lord of Hell died, this ancient evil broke free from its cage and went off to get revenge on Cerberus and Samael, who imprisoned him. As you probably guessed, we're playing as Belial, and at this point, you can completely forget about the story again. If the original Painkiller at least delivered it through nice CGI cutscenes, here we get the same cutscenes, but with static images and a voiceover.
There's nothing sweeter than the taste of freedom.
The folks at Mindware Studios decided to experiment a bit and gave the main character a voice. In the first Painkiller, Daniel was silent as a fish during missions, apparently too focused on slicing up demons. Belial, on the other hand, loves to speak and never holds back, constantly throwing out wisecracks at enemies during combat. On one hand, this was a nice addition, but along with the jokes, all that dark atmosphere of the battle between evil and darkness that made the original game special just evaporated.
Gray, a desert. Sphinxes, mummies, sand in my crotch.
But what the developers didn't skimp on was the number of levels. There were 17 of them, plus a completely new arsenal, since we're not controlling some lost bloodthirsty soul anymore, but an ancient all-powerful being. The most notable weapons from the new arsenal were the Screamer, Demon Eggs, and the Razor Cube. The Screamer is a severed demon head that shoots laser beams. The Demon Egg is basically a grenade with a squirming demonic embryo inside. And the Razor Cube, who would have thought, is a flying cube that shoots out a whole bunch of razor-sharp blades. needs. The weapon design in Overdose was actually pretty divisive in the community. Some loved the creativity, others thought it was too goofy. The Screamer head was actually inspired by doom metal album covers. The developers were huge metalheads and wanted weapons that looked like they came straight from a Cannibal Corpse album. Whether that worked or not, well, the 6.5 Metacritic score kinda speaks for itself. Despite the fact that the developers obviously loved People Can Fly's original and tried their best to please fans like themselves, they were missing one very important thing: experience. Yeah, the expansion turned out decent enough, but it was nothing like the Painkiller everyone fell in love with. The game had a more lighthearted, even sloppy atmosphere, weak level design where you could easily get confused and lost, plus the difficulty balance was all screwed up. Overdose was either way too easy or way too hard. So players were pretty disappointed and gave the expansion a 6.5 rating. After Overdose's weak performance, Dreamcatcher wanted to bring back the popularity to the franchise that was starting to wither, throwing money at developing a third game and again trusting it to Homegrown Games Studio. The new game got the subtitle Resurrection, came out in 2009, and once again stuffed players into the skin of a new hero, elite assassin William Sherman. It all starts with William accidentally blowing himself up, along with a bus of innocent people with some C4. And actually, no, stop. Let me not even talk about this game's story, because Painkiller Resurrection is absolute garbage. Not a game, and the story is far from the main reason this piece of crap failed. But let's go through this step by step. First off, the gameplay. Remember that rich variety of interesting locations and enemies in the first Painkiller? How nice it was to search for gold secrets on big maps and strafe circles around rapidly shrinking monster hordes. Well, Resurrection has absolutely none of that. At the start of a mission, they just throw you into an arena full of enemies and force you to kill every single one. After a little bloodbath, a door opens at the other end of the arena, leading to another identical arena. Basically, a level in this game is just a chain of meaningless, boring arenas, and that's literally the entire game, no exaggeration. And as if mocking the player, the maps are just huge, so you literally get lost and have no idea where to go. But hey, how thrilling it is to cross a massive empty plateau every time you need to get to the next arena. As if that wasn't enough, the game had literally nothing interesting. The weapons, same as the first Painkiller, and the story is so worthless in its emptiness and lack of ideas that it's hard to even summarize. Here's the thing about Resurrection that most people don't know. It was basically a cash grab made with almost no budget. The studio had less than 10 people working on it, and they were given just 6 months to push something out. The publisher literally just wanted any Painkiller product on shelves to keep milking the franchise. This is textbook How to Kill a Beloved Series 101, and sadly it's still happening today with other franchises. Painkiller Resurrection was a deafening failure. Absolutely everyone hated it, and one of the most undemanding gamers could find even a tiny bit of enjoyment in it. Right now, the game's user score on Metacritic sits at 4.2, which in my humble opinion is still generous for this piece of trash. Of course, after such a massive failure, Dreamcatcher couldn't afford to screw up again, and once more trusted development of yet another expansion to the highly acclaimed Homegrown Games. Painkiller Redemption came out in 2011. Trying to win back players' interest, the studio decided to go all in and combine both the original Painkiller's hero Daniel Garner and the fan-favorite Belial from Overdose in the story. The story is again told through animated text inserts. It tells how Belial saves Daniel Garner from the trap he ended up in after Battle Out of Hell, and together they go off to destroy the remnants of the Devil's Army. There's honestly nothing more to say about the story since it turned out even more full of holes than Resurrection. There are only 6 levels in the expansion, but surprisingly, the developers decided to go for quantity over quality. Now each location has literal thousands of enemies, the highest number in the entire series. But this didn't help at all. The gameplay turned into meditative half-hour shootouts that left you feeling universal exhaustion rather than any satisfaction. In every other way, this was just Resurrection with a different name, trying to coast on familiar main characters. Do I even need to say that Redemption failed just as hard? Though it did so much more quietly and quickly disappear into oblivion. Get this, on Metacritic, only some players even bothered to rate it, giving it a 2.9. Critics completely forgot it existed. When everything's already terrible, why stop? Might as well keep diving deeper. That's apparently what Dreamcatcher thought, which by 2012 had merged with Nordic Games and became THQ Nordic, because they once again, for the umpteenth time, ordered another Painkiller expansion and handed it off to yet another unknown studio. At this point in 2012, the Painkiller franchise had become the gaming equivalent of a zombie, dead but still shambling around because someone kept reanimating its corpse. THQ Nordic was basically playing Dr. Frankenstein with the IP, and every attempt just made things worse. The gaming press had completely given up covering these releases, and most fans had moved on to games like the 2016 Doom reboot announcement that was generating buzz. Released on February 29, 2012, Painkiller Recurring Evil turned out just as horrible as the previous two expansions. There's literally nothing to even say about it. Just 5 levels, no new enemies, no new weapons, no new characters. The story continues Resurrection's line, but somehow manages to be even worse. Look, let me just quickly say the game's rating sits at 3.6, and we'll never speak of it again. After this string of absolute disasters, something finally clicked in the publisher's head, and they decided to release an actual new game in the Painkiller universe. In 2012, just 8 years after the original came out, though this game was only new at first glance. See, THQ Nordic reached out for help to former People Can Fly employees who developed the cult original and had now founded their own studio, the Farm 51. Why not go to People Can Fly themselves? Because they weren't interested in returning to Painkiller. In 2011, the studio released the now cult classic but poorly selling Bulletstorm, and in 2012, they were busy helping Epic Games develop Gears of War Judgment. Later, the studio only worked on Bulletstorm ports and some Fortnite events, and in 2021 released the fairly successful Outriders. People Can Fly's journey is actually pretty fascinating. After Painkiller, they went on to create some of the gaming's most innovative shooters. Bulletstorm introduced the kill with skill system that influenced tons of games after it. They also helped create the best Gears of War campaign ever made. And Outriders? That game sold over 3.5 million copies despite mixed reviews. These guys know shooters, which makes the Painkiller franchise's death even more tragic. So in 2012, returning to Painkiller wasn't on their agenda. The guys at the Farm 51 quickly figured out what horror had happened to the series, and on October 31st, 2012, released a half-remake, half-sequel to the first Painkiller subtitled Hell and Damnation. The story in the new game both repeated and expanded the familiar plot. The main addition was that right after the original's ending, Death herself appears to Daniel and gives him a new weapon, the Soul Catcher. Death offers another deal you can't refuse. If the hero wants to get his wife back and cleanse his soul, he needs to collect 7,000 souls. Only then will he be free. Right after making the deal, he's sent back to the very beginning of the first Painkiller. Except for the new weapon, Hell and Damnation was more like a massive bug fix for the original and an apology for all the crap that happened with the expansions. They barely added any new content to the game. The main additions were co-op campaign mode and moving to the more modern Unreal Engine 3. In every other way, this was good old Painkiller, just with a prettier wrapper, which confused players and critics a bit. Yeah, thanks for the co-op and rebalanced gameplay, but where are the fresh ideas? Sure, Hell and Damnation was way better than anything that came out in recent years, but it wasn't something new, just the same old stuff we'd forgotten was good. So it got a predictable 6.6 from players. What's really sad is that Hell and Damnation was actually the last Painkiller game ever made. Yeah, there have been re-releases and bundles since then, but no new games. As of 2025, it's been 13 years since the last Painkiller. The franchise is completely dead. THQ Nordic still owns the rights, but they've shown zero interest in reviving it. Meanwhile, the boomer shooter genre exploded with games like Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, Dusk, Ultra Kill, and Amid Evil carrying the torch that Painkiller once held. Painkiller is a textbook example of how stupidly and incompetently a publisher can handle their intellectual property. The franchise had everything it needed to become a star among first-person shooters, but 3 trash expansions in a row and a frankly weak half-remake destroyed the long-rotting corpse of a truly legendary game. Now, nobody remembers Hell and Damnation, Resurrection, or even Overdose, and that's probably for the best. Let history remember just the one and only original Painkiller. But here's the crazy part, the original Painkiller still holds up in 2025. You can grab it on Steam for like a couple bucks, and it runs perfectly on modern systems. The modding community kept it alive with HD texture packs and gameplay improvements. If you want that pure, mindless shooter experience without all the modern gaming BS, the original Painkiller is still one of the best options out there. Just stay the hell away from everything that came after Battle Out of Hell. But wait, that's not the end of the story. In March 2025, after 13 years of silence, a brand new Painkiller game was announced at the Future Games Show.
That is one ugly creature.
It's being developed by Polish studio Anshar Studios, with publishers 3D Realms and Saber Interactive backing it up. THQ Nordic is no longer involved. The publishing rights went to the legendary 3D Realms. Yeah, the same folks who gave us Duke Nukem. The game launches October 9th, 2025 on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series XS. And guess what? Pre-orders are already live. This isn't a remake or remaster, it's a full reimagining of the classic franchise with a completely new story. Now, we're not playing as Daniel Garner, but as one of 4 new champion characters: Ink, Void, Soul, or Roach. The story's fresh too. You're trapped in purgatory for your sins against heaven, but the voice of the creator gives you a chance at redemption. You need to stop the fallen angel Azazel, who's about to unleash his demonic armies on Earth. But here's what's truly revolutionary. The game now supports online co-op for up to 3 players. Yeah, you heard that right. Now you can shred demons with your buddies. The co-op edition is actually pretty controversial in the Painkiller community. Old school fans are split. Some think it betrays the lonely, atmospheric vibe of the original, while others are excited to finally experience this chaos with friends. The developers claim they've balanced it so solo play still feels like classic Painkiller, but we'll see when it launches. Classic weapons are back: the stake gun, shotgun, electro driver, but with new firing modes. Plus, the tarot card system is still there for upgrading abilities. Standard edition costs $39.99, while the deluxe edition at $49.99 includes 3 additional DLCs with new weapon and character skins. Pre-ordering gets you the Iron Crusade skin pack, medieval skins for all 4 characters, and 6 weapon skins. Here's something interesting. The price point at $39.99 is actually pretty aggressive for a 2025 AAA release. Most games are hitting $70 now, so either 3D Realms is trying to win back fans with value pricing, or this might be a smaller scale production than we're expecting. The fact that it's not getting a physical release until later also suggests they're testing the waters. But here's the kicker. On September 24th, 2025, the developers announced a new Rogue Angel mode, a roguelike mode launching with the game. This is pretty controversial considering classic Painkiller was never about roguelike mechanics. Fan reaction is mixed as hell. Veterans on Reddit and forums are split. Some are happy for any return of the franchise, others think this isn't the Painkiller they fell in love with. PC Gamer already came out pretty critical, saying the new trailer doesn't knock their socks off, and that the game looks too generic for 2025. The timing is actually perfect though. The boomer shooter renaissance is in full swing with games like Ultra Kill, Dusk, and Proteus, proving there's a huge appetite for old-school FPS action. Plus, Doom Eternal showed that you can modernize classic gameplay without losing the soul. The question is, can Anshar Studios pull off what ID Software did? They're a relatively unknown studio whose biggest claim to fame is working on detached VR and some mobile games. This is their shot at the big leagues. Interestingly, People Can Fly, the original creators, aren't involved at all. They're currently busy with a completely new game, a tropical survival shooter that looks like a mix of Far Cry and their old work. So, will Painkiller rise from the dead, or will this be another nail in the coffin? We'll find out October 9th, 2025, but one thing's for sure. After 13 years of silence, the franchise is trying to come back, and it's either going to be a triumphant return or the final death rattle of a legendary series. Meanwhile, if you want to experience the real Painkiller, the original is currently on sale on Steam for just $2. Best $2 you'll spend this year. Huge thanks to everyone for watching. Don't forget to like the video, hit that notification bell, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Drop a comment about which game series you'd like to see next time. Catch you later.